God does not change. His call remains the same from generation to generation. He still looks for those who will stand in the breach, intercede for the people, and act as a shield between wrath and mercy in the strength of his might. In Ezekiel 22:30, the Lord declared that he sought for a man to stand in the gap, to make up the hedge and intercede for the land, but he found none. There are only 3 places in the Bible where God is said to have wondered: in the Gospels because of great faith, in the Gospels because of no faith. Here in Ezekiel, because no one would rise in self-sacrificing prayer, as in fasting. This is a terrifying indictment against a people so hardened that no one would weep, no one would stand, no one would plead. These pseudo-pastors refuse to weep between the porch and the altar, and this call is no less urgent today than it was back then. The breaches are many: moral, doctrinal, familial, spiritual. Who will rise in holy desperation? Who will weep for the children poisoned by the normalization of sin? Who will fast for a church that has lost its fear of Godand, a nation drowning in deception? We have entered an era where pharmakia, sorcery, which we call drugs, sexual perversion, greed, and confusion are not only tolerated, they are celebrated. Biblical fasting is not an outdated spiritual practice. It is the furnace of intercession. It is not simply abstaining from food, it is a declaration of war against the flesh and the lies of this world. It is an act of worship, a sacrifice that says, "You are my sustenance, Lord." It is priestly. It is prophetic. It is standing in the place of the people, offering yourself to God for their sake. We are never more like Christ than when we fast and allow him to make us repairers of the breach. Does not Christ ever live to intercede for us? In fact, if Christ's ministry was anything, it was most definitely a ministry of intercession. Isn't that what he's doing right now? Any contemplating rational mind must of necessity conclude that his ministers will be interceding as well. Let us remember, true fasting is an act of priestly intercession. It is a bloodless offering. It cries out not just for personal breakthrough, but for national repentance. Fasting doesn't earn God's favor. It postures us rightly before him. It is a megaphone to heaven that says, "We have no help but you. Those from you shall be called the repairer of the breach, the restorer of streets to dwell in." Isaiah 58:12. These are not poetic aspirations. They are prophetic declarations. The word "shall" is not optional. It is a divine certainty, but it hinges on a people who will fast God's way. Isaiah 58 presents the fast God chooses, not one of empty rituals, but one that breaks every yoke, looses the bonds of wickedness, and lets the oppressed go free. It is a fast that flows into justice, into righteousness, into love. There are breaches in our pulpits, breaches in our homes, breaches in the moral foundations of society, breaches in truth, in prayer, in unity. But the greatest breach is the one that separates man from God. The church must repair this breach by returning to the altarto, fasting to holiness in the strength of his might. Pastors who do not fast for their flocks have abandoned their post on the wall. They have become hirelings rather than shepherds. And I believe it is axiomatic. They care nothing for the sheep. The church is the bride of Christ, and every pastor is called to guard her purity. Would you not defend your own wife if she were attacked? And yet, many do not fast for the church, though Christ shed his blood for her. This is negligence of the highest order. Before Nehemiah ever picked up a stone, he fasted, wept, and mourned. He heard of the ruins of Jerusalem and his heart broke. He fasted before he moved. The work of rebuilding begins with the work of fastingin, the strength of his might. So, here is the question. Will we fast? Will we stand in the gap? Will we weep? Will we sound the trumpet? Will we deny ourselves? This is the call not to activism, but to anguish. Not to programs, but to prayer. Not to performance, but to his power. The church is God's embassy. When she fasts, heaven responds. Hell trembles. The nation is shaken, and God is honored and glorified. Let us return to him. Let us rend our hearts. Let us fast not as a formality, but as fire. Not to be seen by men, but to be heard by God. Not to impress, but to intercede. Not in our own strength, but in the strength of his might. Let us rebuild the walls of Jerusalem in the strength of his might. Come, Lord, come.